Racism and prejudice is everywhere, whether you're brown, black, Muslim, Christian, or Palestinian.
Iyad, who is autistic, was walking to his special needs school near the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound on Saturday morning when he was confronted by Israeli security forces. Two officers tried to stop him, suspecting he was armed, and chased him to this shed for rubbish bins, where he was shot twice in the torso.
Every disease has ever came from China only. Everything comes from China. It's disgusting.
Prosecutors say Officer Derek Chauvin had his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, including 2 minutes and 53 seconds after Floyd had become unresponsive.
We as human beings have been constantly evolving even in our racism. Where some may say that compared to the past it has gotten better, I believe that it has gotten worse. Nowadays, people don't explicitly say that they are racist. Instead, they discriminate against you while assuring you that they're not doing that out of race or color. My brain can't even comprehend the concept of hating someone just based on things that they cannot change. So instead of starting throwing curses at those people and pointing out how they are horrible human beings, I will do something just as good. I will start analyzing their mindset through psychology. Disclaimer: racism and prejudice are not a mental illness, because if we ever categorize it as such, it will be extremely offensive for the people who actually struggle with mental illness. One factor that many racists seem to have, which I believe to be very ironic, is their need to belong. They usually find themselves not having the ability to form any close relationships, so instead they go and join extremists and hate groups to make them feel that they belong somewhere. And this us versus them mentality makes them feel that they have a lot of social support from the groups that they have joined. And this satisfies their need to belong. So a second factor that many racists have is projection. Projection is a defense mechanism that helps people avoid their own problems and shortcomings by transferring their issues onto others. So a lot of the times when people choose to discriminate against a certain group by claiming that they are violent or terrible people, usually they actually believe this about themselves. A third characteristic is that they are emotionally incompetent. A lot of times it is easier for people to just believe everything that they hear and assume instead of sitting down and analyzing the situation and seeing it for what it truly is. A lot of the times their beliefs give them a sense of entitlement and superiority. And as a result, it's like they don't want to give up that belief in fear of being unsuperior. When if they actually sit down and analyze the situation for themselves, they will realize that being kind to others does not weaken them in any kind of way. So now that we know some of the factors that contribute to a person having this type of mentality, let's actually see what we can do to fix this. Now let's see some strategies that can be effective from a psychological point of view in order to try and end this racism and prejudice. So the first strategy that we should use is try to focus and tackle on how we can change the problem inside of our groups instead of outside. So for example, if I, as an Egyptian, go and talk to a group of Americans about how they should not be racist, they might interpret this as me trying to attack them. And this is not necessarily because they are bad people, it's because they just might see me as a person outside their group who's just criticizing them. So instead of trying to hear what I have to say, they will start feeling defensive and will start focusing on how they can defend themselves instead of addressing the actual situation. We should start talking to people that are inside our group so they can actually hear the message and not take it as an attack. A second thing that we really need to do is to start focusing on the acceptable behavior instead of the non-acceptable ones. So for example, if I make a campaign and say racism is extremely common and it needs to be stopped, people will just focus on racism is extremely common. And when they have in their mindset that racism is still common, they will deal with it as such. They will start dealing with it as if it's a natural, normal thing that's happening all across the world. And that is not what we want. We want to clarify that this behavior is abnormal and should never be tolerated. So while I may not be the best at creating good slogans, but if we are going to make a campaign, it should deliver the message of being kind is the new norm. This helps people now understand that kindness is the normal and acceptable thing to do among their communities. A third strategy that would be extremely effective is modeling. Modeling is the process of learning a new behavior by observing other people. So if you find yourself from a privileged background, try to have a lot of friends from different ethnicities or religions in order for others to see that people with different colors or religion can still coexist peacefully and actually have fun together. Another way to use modeling in advertisements or campaigns is by showing the minority groups as successful people. We need to show people that they can become extremely successful despite whichever group they belong to. Another important thing that you need to do is to never be silent. Something that I have noticed is when someone is attacking somebody else, the people that are observing the situation tend to freeze up and decide not to speak because they believe that the person that's being attacked is the only one who has the right to defend and talk about themselves. When fact is, this is not true. You have to show the racist person that this behavior is not tolerated anywhere. Because if we become silent when somebody is being racist or showing discrimination, we give people the assumption that this behavior is socially acceptable. And this is not what we want. Lastly, something that we can do is to try and think carefully before we call somebody a racist. Because while most of the time labeling someone a racist is actually beneficial in order to make other people fear doing the same behavior that that person did in order to avoid being called a racist. However, it makes the person that we labeled as a racist go into defensive mode. As you have seen from this video, a person going into defensive mode is never a good thing. So if you find yourself having the ability to have a one-on-one civil conversation with that person, I highly suggest doing that instead of calling them a racist, and make them more self-aware and understand that what they are doing is not correct. Because if you are able to change their thought process and help them understand that their actions are completely wrong, you actually might have saved a person from abuse that they may have received from that person. Alright you guys, that was it for today's video, and I really hope that you enjoyed it and benefited from it. And as always, I will be putting my sources in the description box. And until the next time, bye!